I'll be watching for your questions in the chat during the presentation, so please write them in as we go along so that we can come back to them. There will also be time for written or verbal questions after the presentation. The Spanish version of the PowerPoint will be in the chat for you to download. And a final note, we will try to remain focused on today's topics, but if there are topics outside of this that relate to the employment department, please put those in the chat and we will do our best to follow up with you. And now I would like to ask Acting Director David Gerstenfeld to introduce himself and share more about why we are all here today.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you everyone for joining us. As Mike said, I'm David Gerstenfeld, the Acting Director at the Oregon Employment Department. And we're here today really to hear from you and to get your input about the budget for the paid leave program. This is part of a new approach in state government of getting more community involvement earlier in the budget process. And we're focusing on the paid leave program today. This is something we'll be doing in future years for all of the programs that the Employment Department administers. Our paid leave program has had quite a focus on getting input from people as we've been building the program. But this type of engagement focused on the budget process is another way for us to get more insights from you and from others to help us design the program and operate it in the best way possible. Although this is part of a formal budget process, we will likely not be talking about numbers much today. Really, what we want to do is to give you a brief overview of the program and then focus on hearing from you about what's most important about it. So what would be helpful for you and for your community members to access benefits? What are potential barriers? What are concerns? This information will help us make decisions about how to build and then operate the program. And as an example, information you give us about how to best let you and your community colleagues know about the program will influence how we share information and what tools we use to notify people about the benefits. Information that we get from you about how the application process for people seeking benefits should work will help inform how we build that process and could impact our staffing levels as well. Those are just a couple of examples. And all of those decisions that we will make will then be reflected in the budget that we ask for to operate the paid leave program. We do make a request for a budget, and that request goes to the governor, along with requests from all other agencies. The governor will then make a recommendation to the legislature, and the legislature makes the final budget decisions. Another new part of this budget process is having a racial equity impact statement. So when we submit our budget request to the governor, we'll work with the governor's Racial Justice Council to help explain what the impact of that budget is on racial equity for the paid leave program. And we know that to have that needed impact on racial equity, we do need to do things differently than we have in the past. And the creation of this brand new paid leave program is a unique opportunity to do it from the very beginning. So we really look forward to hearing from you what's important about the program, about how it operates, so that we can do our best to meet those needs. Even the way that we're seeking this input is a bit of a new approach. We created our own plan about how to do outreach and to hear from people, ran that plan by several community organizations, and made some significant changes based on the feedback they provided. Importantly, I want to emphasize that this is not a one-time exercise. So we hope to hear a lot from you today about what's important about the program. We hope even more that this is part of an ongoing relationship. So after we've concluded all of our community engagement sessions, we will be combining the information that we receive and publicly sharing what type of feedback we received and how that impacted our budget request. Even after all of that work is done, we hope that you will continue to share with us information and insights about what's important, about what barriers people might have to accessing the program, And what you're seeing as the program begins to operate. So we continue to make sure it supports everyone as well as possible. Given the ambitious timelines for starting the paid leave program and the huge amount of work to be done, we do know that we can't do everything at once. So we anticipate that some of the information you provide us are things that we'll be able to include from day one as we start operating the program. But we expect that some of the feedback we receive will be things that we definitely want to take action on, but that may need to wait until after the program is initially operational. I want to talk a little bit about the team that is helping us with this budget engagement work. And there's a lot of people behind the scenes helping with this work, but kind of the core team is represented on this slide. Janine, Rebecca, Teresa, and myself are from the director's office at the employment department. Mike and Julie are from the administrative business services area, including the budget function. And Karen, Juan, Michelle, Angela, and Rachel are from the paid leave group, the group that's primarily building and will be operating the program once it's live. I want to talk a little bit about our agency strategic plan and the different pieces of it. It's something that was created before the paid leave program even existed, but that fits very well with the purposes and the goals of that program. And I want to highlight our agency's vision, which is in Oregon, where meaningful work enables the state's diverse people and businesses to realize their full potential, creating prosperity in every community. And to do that, we know that the program has to serve all of Oregon's diverse people and businesses, and that we have to have ongoing relationships with all of Oregon's communities. So we hope that as you give us feedback, you'll really focus on what you see from your perspective or you anticipate from other people's perspectives might be most important to accessing the benefits or might be the most problematic. Our agency values of integrity, respect, and community are reflected in this work that we're doing. And certainly that community is a key part of our discussion today and the way that we're going about building the paid leave program. The goals that our agency set, one of them is explicitly focused on community engagement, about doing that across the state to maximize awareness and use of public workforce resources. And that's really our goal here with the paid leave program, is to make sure that everybody is aware of it and that anybody that can benefit from the program can easily access those benefits. Well, the other goals don't explicitly talk about community engagement. We really can't be successful with any of those other goals either unless we do have that strong engagement. We know that to really fulfill our mission and to serve Oregon, we need to have strong ongoing relationships with Oregon communities, and that we need to have members of those communities as part of our team. And that means both as employees here at the agency and also as valued partners as we do our work. And the operating principles that you see are some of the guiding principles that all of our employees use each day as we do our work and make decisions. And you can see again that one of those is focused on seeking out and to form effective alliances to address community needs. Our agency does have several major programs, and I want to just briefly highlight what those are before we focus in on the paid leave program that we're talking about today. Our agency provides unemployment insurance benefits that support economic stability for Oregon workers, their families, their businesses, and communities during times of unemployment. Our Workforce Operations Division works with partners to operate WorkSource Oregon centers throughout the state, helping businesses find skilled workers and helping people find jobs, careers, training, and other resources to help them advance professionally. Our Workforce and Economic Research Division creates and distributes reliable information about Oregon's economy and workforce. And that information can help employers make business decisions, can help job seekers identify career paths and jobs, and importantly can help legislators and other policymakers have good information upon which to make decisions. And finally, the program that we're here to talk about in more detail is the paid leave program. And instead of me summarizing, I'm going to turn this over to Karen, who will give you a little bit of background before we get to the exciting part for us of hearing from you about the insights that you have for us. So Karen?
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I get into the specifics about paid family and medical leave insurance in Oregon, I'd like to talk about how we are working to address equity and access as we build this important program. This slide is really about the fabric of how we implement paid leave. We are committed to addressing equity and access in a comprehensive and different way, as we recognize traditionally agencies have created our programming oftentimes without talking to our customers. We don't want to replicate those practices from the past because they have resulted in continuing systemic or institutional harm. This budget engagement forum is an example of how we are reaching out in new ways to gather input from communities and our customers so that we can listen versus making assumptions around priorities and service delivery. It's pretty rare in state government that we have an opportunity to create a program from scratch, but the legislature passing this program in 2019 has allowed us just that unique chance. We're striving to assure that as we build the program, we consider all the possibilities for providing universal and equitable access across the board. This includes consciously designing our program with consideration for disability, income, race and ethnicity, culture, gender and gender identity, employment status, education level, geographic location, access to technology, and justice system involvement. Our commitment also extends to recognizing, approaching, and offering government-to-government consultation with our 9 tribal nations that fall inside of our state borders. We acknowledge that cultural values and unconscious biases impact our work every day, and we want to take conscious steps to avoid any negative impacts from them. We're in a position of continuous learning, and recognizing these biases so that we can minimize them is important. As part of this effort, we are applying our agency's equity framework to all of our decision making, and we're reviewing that framework as we meet with communities or our stakeholders in order to continuously improve the tool. We recognize also that as bureaucracies, we have not always approached our work with trauma-informed practices, but we are committed to using trauma-informed approaches when we engage with the public. We recognize that individuals we serve may have experienced trauma, and we want to assure that our practices do not further their harm. As I mentioned, paid leave was passed by the Oregon legislature in 2019, and we're one of only 11 states in the country to implement such a program. Paid leave provides an important and vital safety net for working Oregonians who need the time to take time off work for a major life event. This program has the potential to really impact some of our ongoing causes of generational poverty, giving low-wage workers more opportunities that wealthier workers already have, so that they can take time off to bond with their children, deal with domestic and sexual violence issues, or with the health needs for themselves or their loved ones. Data indicates that paid leave increases economic security, improves equitable access to healthcare, and it promotes healthy child development. But paid leave also has tangible benefits for businesses. It reduces employee turnover, it promotes long-term employee retention by reducing training costs, and it increases productivity and morale. In Oregon, paid leave is for up to 12 weeks, with 2 additional weeks possible for some pregnancy-related conditions. And leave can be taken in the 3 broad categories you see here. Medical leave for an individual or a family member when they have a serious illness, family bonding with a child during their first year of birth or adoption, or safe leave for victims of domestic and sexual violence. So you might be wondering, how will paid leave work in Oregon? Well, paid leave works by us creating a trust fund that both employees and businesses pay into. These contributions are based on your gross payroll amount, and the businesses pay 40% of the contribution, while the individuals pay 60%. Some businesses will choose to purchase or create their own equivalent plan versus participating in the state trust. But individuals working for an equivalent plan employer will still receive the same level or higher of the benefit required by paid family and medical leave. So when you have a life event, a worker would apply for leave, including any eligibility documentation, and then they would let their employer know that they will need the leave. And after you are approved for leave and benefits, you would receive weekly payments for the amount of time you need, up to that 12 weeks for most situations. If you've been employed more than 90 days, your job will be protected while you are receiving paid leave. Our program has a very ambitious implementation schedule, and this slide shows some of our major milestones. Those equivalent plans I was just talking about will begin coming in this September. We will begin collecting contributions from individuals and businesses starting in January of 2023. And then by September of 2023, we will begin issuing individual benefits. And as we work towards these goals, we're trying to assure that we build, again, the program with lots of collaboration and engagement. We have a 9-member advisory committee where half of the representatives are from business and half from labor and worker advocates. These folks have been helping inform all of our policy and rule decisions so far. And we're also engaging with community in sessions like today so that we can build relationships and connect with traditionally underserved communities that we know paid leave in Oregon will benefit the most, so that we better understand those we serve and we can listen to their needs and inform our decision making. We also have a contract with Brink Communications, and they're assisting us with what does our program look like? How do we get information out to people and communicate? How do we brand this program so that people recognize it? And as we build the program, we will continue to hire members into our paid leave team. And so we'd love for members of the community to consider applying for those jobs. If you're interested or you know someone who would be interested, please sign up to receive those notices. We'll have some links at the end of our presentation. For those of you who have had some experience with our old mainframe computer systems, we have some really good news. We will have a new system, Francis, in place for paid leave implementation. This system will have a single portal for businesses where they can have their unemployment insurance taxes and their paid leave contributions submitted. And later, when we're providing benefits in the fall of 2023, individuals will also be accessing their accounts through the modernized system. The modernized system will look similar to what's on this screen, and it will have all of the capabilities you've come accustomed to in your regular business interactions. So you could view your account, you could make changes. If something's incorrect, you can submit that. You could upload documents if needed, and it will also have a chatbot to be able to help you. One of the most significant ways in which community can participate in developing this program and our budget priorities is by assisting us with our rule and policy making process. We're setting all the guideposts for the program through administrative rules. We have 5 batches of rules. You can see them on the screen here. And we're very interested in feedback as we write, review, and implement those rules. If you have interest in attending a public meeting or receiving information about this process, again, the contact information will be available at the end of today's session.